Audio.
You see like glamour portaledge shots, especially like Tommy Caldwell and Kevin on the Dawn Wall, where they each had like their own portaledge. You know, I was in this like cramped portaledge with my partner, just like trying to put my like shirt on, and there's all these straps like hanging in my face, and I'm like so cramped, and I'm like, this is not the glamorous big wall portaledge life that people think exists.
Hey y'all, I'm Ryan Devlin, and welcome to the Struggle Climbing Show's Pro Clinic on Big Wall Tactics with one of the sport's rising stars, the Indiana Jones of vertical terrain, Jordan Cannon. Y'all, Jordan joined the pod in Season 1 to chat through his struggles and breakthroughs in training, nutrition, tactics, and mental game, as we like to do. And today, he is back to zero in on an area of particular specialty for him, big wall and multi-pitch tactics. Now, here's a guy who's honed his craft on some super impressive objectives, from freeing El Cap's Golden Gate route in a day to accomplishing the Yosemite Triple Crown, and just recently being only the 6th human to free the stunning and challenging Yosemite test piece, Wet Lycra Nightmare. He has dialed in those big wall tactics. He has given dozens, maybe hundreds of clinics on multi-pitch climbing through the American Alpine Club and Arc'teryx Academies, and today, he shares it all with you, the struggle listener. On longer objectives like multi-pitch and big wall climbs, tactics are often the difference maker on having an enjoyable time that ends in a top-out versus bailing or epicing. Now, whether you're new to this style of climbing or a pro like Jordan, you're going to gain a ton from this pro clinic as he breaks it down into beginner, intermediate, and advanced chapters covering common pitfalls and offering up actionable beta to take your multi-pitch climbing to the next level. I'm so psyched for this one. Now, quick note here, Jordan and I actually recorded this before he sent Wet Lycra Nightmare, and as you'll hear at the start of our chat, he recaps the non-send of that route and what that taught him, which I think is actually really cool. But fortunately, there was a happy ending on that one, and you can see his inspiring IG posts for the full stoke on that amazing route. This Pro Clinic's brought to you by patrons and subscribers of the show. Thank you all so much. You get access to this full episode, as well as the entire catalog of Pro Clinics by amazing pros, early and ad-free episodes, and tons more. None of this would be possible without you. Thank you all for your support. Now, if you're not a patron, enjoy this free preview of this chat with Jordan, and if you'd like to hear more, pop on over to patreon.com/The Struggle Climbing Show to check out all of the perks. Or if you're listening on Apple, you can subscribe with just the tap of a button right there in your podcast player. Thank you. I love you. All right, let's get ready to go big with Jordan Cannon. What are you munching on?
Some peanut butter pretzels.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Totally my jam.
What are you slurping on?
What? In my limited edition Struggle can koozie?
I finally got mine, by the way.
Sparkling water. Oh, good. Do you pick up your mail every season at the Honnold residence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got it very late.
Or did they bring it to the valley? Did they bring like a big mail bag for you?
Yeah, they brought it to the valley, actually.
Well, man, it's great to connect. How are you? What's cracking?
Not much. I'm getting ready to drive to LA, and that's why I decided to take this call here.
Where are you? Are you in the valley?
I'm in my friend's son's bedroom recording this because there's a desk and better Wi-Fi and hopefully quieter. My van's parked outside.
That sounds great, actually.
But I don't get as good of service out there.
Yeah, the audio quality's good. What do you got? You got notes?
I wrote some notes down.
Oh, man. Fantastic. Well, good. I know we're in good hands already. But yeah, dude, before we jump in, let me get an update because last time we talked, I guess last time we hung out, we were rock climbing steep things at Mount Potosi. And I say we in the very general sense. You were rock climbing steep things. Alex was rock climbing steep things. And I was getting my lunch taken by a 12A. But we were together, so I can say we were climbing steep things. And so obviously, since then, it's been valley season. So what's been shaking in the valley?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the main difference since the last time we climbed is that I'm a weak little trad climber now after having spent the past 2.5 months trad climbing mainly in Yosemite. Yeah, I haven't actually left the valley in the past 2.5 months even to get gas or food. I've just been fully posted up in here. And it's been totally awesome. But I've just about reached my limit for my psyche and my energy for climbing here. It's also getting really hot, so I'm just starting to think forward to the future and start, yeah, building up the desire to go bouldering and sport climbing, summer training mode, and get ready for another trad climbing season or big wall season in the fall. So
get strong, get weak, get strong.
yeah, that's basically it. You get strong so you can go to the valley and get weak, but get very like good all day fitness and wear your shoes for a long time and hurt your feet forever. And then you get weak and you get tired and you get not psyched. And then you go sport climbing and bouldering and generally feel good about yourself. And
I love it.
And then you come back.
Well, congratulations are in order. El Corazon looked like a totally sick route. Can you just we could probably talk about it for an hour, but can we talk about it for like 3 minutes? Maybe just tell me a little bit about what drew you to that line and what it took to put it together. And maybe some of that can kind of take us through part of the big wall tactics conversation, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I basically had 4 free climbing projects in the valley this season, 2 of which I was able to do relatively easily in comparison to the other 2, which I was not able to do, mainly because of, I mean, I hate to say it, poor conditions and hot weather, which I do not climb very well in. I'm not Alex Magos and can just like crush in the sun, like baking hot sun, and have conditions not matter to me.
You're not German enough.
No, I'm not. I'd get crippled by the heat.
So you had 4 objectives, 2 of which you were able to tackle this season and 2 not. So yeah, what are the highs and the lows there?
Well, I mean, the main reason, that I was sport climbing in Vegas and particularly at Mount Potosi this season was really just trying to get accustomed to steeper climbing. Because all of my goals in the valley this season, or the 2 harder ones, are all really steep. The steepest climbing that Yosemite has to offer. The first one that I did, it was kind of like a warm-up project. It was called it's a 6-pitch route called Mark of the Beast on Schultz's Ridge, which was the aid line that Mason Earl did the first free ascent of from bottom to top back in the day. And that thing was awesome. The steep climbing in Yosemite is so cool, and it was a little just short 6-pitch route, but every pitch packs a punch, and it doesn't go into the shade until the afternoon, and so you would basically just get to hang out all morning and then go and try hard in the afternoon, and just climbing in shorts and no shirt in the wind up on this like crazy steep overhanging formation with these wild pitches. That was the first one I did, and was happy to put that down just within a week of work. And then I started working on this route called Wet Lycra Nightmare on the Leaning Tower, which was like my big project that I knew was really gonna push me. The hardest single pitch routes I've ever climbed have been 13D, and this is like my first 13D multi-pitch route, and the crux of the route is like right in the middle of the Leaning Tower, and the Leaning Tower is the steepest granite wall in North America, and this route has like the steepest climbing Yosemite has to offer consistently. And it's really stacked. It's got a ton of hard pitches, and surprisingly, I didn't get shut down on the crux pitch. I worked on that route for over a month and was even working on a film project on it, which took a little bit more work with, just having more people up there to film, but then having the route, rigged with fixed lines so that they could film and I could rehearse it and all that stuff. But yeah, I gave it 2 attempts, and each time I was able to free the 13D crux pitch in the middle, but then I failed on like the second to last 513 pitch, only 13A at the top, just because it went into the sun and got really hot, and I just wasn't able to do it. So it's a little frustrating when you get shut down, not necessarily because of like your physical strength or fitness, when you get shut down by an external factor, but that's a huge part of big wall tactics and a lot of what I'll bring to the table today, I think. But yeah, so after that, after my like second failed attempt, I had these plans to climb El Corazon, which is a free route on El Capitan with my buddy Brent. And we'd been planning this kind of all year, and it was on the calendar. He kind of comes in the valley for smash and grab missions rather than kind of posting up for the whole season like I do. So his schedule has to be a little bit more like rigid. And so that kind of came up on the calendar, and I was like, I can't. I wanted to give another attempt on the Leaning Tower, but ultimately had to just like change focus and go up on El Cap with Brent. And it turned out to be a really like good change of pace for me, compared to what I had been, fully consumed with this other project. And, I was like, had low expectations. I was a little intimidated going into El Corazon because I knew it was going to be a hard route, and it has, it would have been the hardest free route I've done in El Cap yet. And yeah, having low expectations and a really good partner and, a huge change of pace, climbing this route wall style over 7 days versus, trying to do this big, hard free climbing day on the Leaning Tower was perfect. And it went super smoothly. It helped me build my confidence again, because after my last attempt on the tower, I was feeling like a garbage rock climber and wasn't feeling very good about myself. And so it was just fun to revisit like the wall climbing style, which I haven't done in a number of years. Everything that I've done in the previous years has been focused on, in a day stuff.
What a season. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Obviously we love the struggle here at the struggle. So if it all came easy, if you were like, I had four objectives and I flashed them all, then, it wouldn't be nearly as rewarding, of course. And it wouldn't honor the level at which you climb. It's so relatable. What I've really taken away a lot from this show is like, you talk to the best climbers in the world, which you're one, like, I felt like a garbage climber. Like, I feel like a garbage climber sometimes when I go out and I get shut down on my 12B that I'm working on. And like, like it's all relative. And to, real goes and do it all but one move. It actually kind of brings to mind Mark Hudon on, Free as Can Be. Essentially, you do every friggin' thing except for the one move. Of course, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to come back and put it down. But, what is that? Just, I want to get into big wall tactics here for a second. But like when it comes down to that, when it's like kind of like that one move, that nemesis move, what do you think your plan will be now as you'll have some time to think about it or train for it and, before you come back?
Yeah, it's kind of a frustrating place to be in because it's essentially the closest you can possibly come to sending. And like I said, when it comes down to more conditions than it does fitness, had I gotten there a little bit faster and had I been able to try that pitch in the sun, it wouldn't have been an issue.
Right.
Or if I had planned to climb the route over 2 days instead of one big day, I would have freed the route already.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, I feel like I've done it in a sense, but I also, like, by the book, have not, and so you get caught in this weird middle ground where you're like, okay, at the end of the day, I'm climbing to have fun, I'm climbing to grow, and I'm climbing to make myself happy. But then we all do kind of like subject ourselves to this game that we all play to, like, to have our ascents also be, especially in like the professional climber position, like have your ascents be like accepted by your peers. And so like I can't say I freed the Leaning Tower or Wet Like a Nightmare on the Leaning Tower because I didn't do that one move, but like I basically did,
Totally.
So it's just it's a weird middle ground to be in. But I'm kind of learning that like each year, climbing just gets harder as you kind of like continue pushing the struggle. You get closer and closer to like your true limit where, yeah, it doesn't mean I wasn't trying hard in the past, but like the projects that I had were a lot more like certain. And this was the first big project that I went up on, truly not knowing whether I was going to even be able to do the crux. That was kind of like how I first approached it. I was like, I'm just going to go try the crux pitch because it doesn't matter if I can do all the other 513s on the route if I can't do the crux. So just like focus in on that and see if I can do it. And if not, figure out what I got to do to come back. And so Yeah. So I guess my kind of tactic with that is obviously being stronger and having a little bit more fitness could help me be able to knock out the pitches in quicker succession and maybe not need as much rest in between. I mean, the route goes from like 12C to 13A to 12D to 13D to 13A to 13A to 13A. And like, that's a
Cool.
pretty stacked day. And unfortunately, like if I was, more boss, like the three other people or four other people who have done the route, I would be able to do that. But I'm not Alex Honnold and I can't just fire off, 513 after 513 without much rest in between. So, my strategy really is just to wait until the fall, when it's cooler and the route gets no sun. Of course, the days are a little bit shorter, but overall, I think it'll be much more conducive to like the conditions I thrive in.
Well, it's super exciting.
Yeah.
Thanks for just giving us a little peek into that. And you also have done such a good job on your Instagram sharing like your journey on El Corazon in particular. You had like just a great series of stories and videos. And for those of us who aren't regular big wall climbers or maybe are just aspiring to be and have never even done multi-pitch at all, like it's such a cool window into your world. And so I'm grateful for your time today, to dive in and kind of geek out here a little bit on big wall tactics from someone who is just at the absolute top of their game in that department. Maybe you could just set the stage in kind of through your lens what tactics even means, what like big wall tactics means to you, and like just why is it so important?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that in preparation for this interview, and I think the first thing that needs to be defined is what big wall climbing actually is.
Sure.
Because I haven't actually taught big wall clinics before. I've only taught multi-pitch efficiency clinics, which, I think kind of the step beyond that is you're just multi-pitch climbing, but spending the night also is kind of the difference between, multi-pitch efficiency is kind of the foundation of big wall climbing. But, I think depending on who you're talking to, big wall might have a different definition, but I think in general, it just means anything that you have to spend more than one day to climb. Would you agree? Is that mainly what you're talking about?
You're asking the wrong guy. I mean, I hope not, because the biggest climb I've done was epinephrine there in Vegas, and I would love to say that was a big wall climb, but I didn't spend the night. I think I was out there for 18 hours. But yeah, that's an interesting. I mean, it certainly sounds like a clean definition to me, and I guess to each their own. But maybe I should broaden the definition of this pro clinic to multi-pitch tactics as well as big wall tactics, something like that, because I think that, I'm sure a lot of the efficiencies and strategies probably cross over between the two. It's just that maybe you don't have to hang a portaledge on one of them.
Yeah, definitely. And I've got lots to share about both, because if you look at kind of the grading systems that these routes are given, epinephrine I think is probably a grade 4. I'm not sure. At most it would be a grade 5, but it's probably a grade 4. Are you familiar with kind of like the grades that routes are given to kind of define the commitment level? Okay,
No.
This is kind of the first step to understanding like multi-pitch climbing and big wall climbing.
Great.
Yeah, the grade attached to the route, it could be like Astroman is 511C grade 5 versus the Rostrum, it's kind of like similar counterpart in terms of difficulty in Yosemite and classicness is 511C grade 4. And that's a huge difference in terms of the overall effort and commitment it takes to climb each of those routes. And if you climb both of them, the Astroman is a lot harder. And the reason it gets that grade 5 is because it has a longer approach, has a longer descent, it has more pitches of 511 on it, it has more pitches overall. And so even though it's given the same free climbing grade that we all pay attention to, 511C, it actually ends up being a lot harder than the Rostrum, which you park on top of, you rappel into. You can easily bail halfway if needed. It only has, like 2 pitches of 511, and yeah, it's just overall much, much easier. So yeah, that grade defines the overall level of commitment, but grade 5 is kind of the blurry line between, like in the past, it used to be, we used to categorize climbs that take a day to a day and a half. Something you might spend one night on, or maybe you bivvy at the base or you bivvy at the top, that would like generally define a grade 5. And then grade 6, which is, El Cap, Half Dome, the Leaning Tower, anything that people climb over multi-day. So grade 6 is basically the biggest in Yosemite that there is to offer, all the way down to like grade 1, which would be like going to climb the manure pile buttress, the Nutcracker or something.
Got it. Okay, yeah, that's super interesting. I have no idea why I never even heard of that, but thank you. I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, yeah, Ryan.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. So, yeah.
I like to call the big grade 4s or the grade 5s, that aren't quite like grade 6, big walls. I just like to call those mini big walls because they are. It's a big freaking wall. It's a huge formation, but, mini big wall.
Mini big wall. I like that.
I like to climb. I climb a lot. I climb a lot of mini big walls.
Yeah, that's great. And obviously, even in those scenarios, tactics become incredibly important because you could be on a mini big wall for 6 hours or you could be on it for 12 hours, depending on how well you put the thing together, right? Or kind of what your systems are like. And so just, yeah, like in that general sense, now that I have a good understanding of kind of what a big wall is. And I think for discussion purposes here, we can think about mini big walls and big walls kind of in like a similar bucket, essentially, many pitches, right? And so then kind of through that lens, just real big picture, what do tactics mean in that sense, and why can it be so important?
So tactics are so important for any multi-pitch or big wall climbing because there's so many other factors to consider when you compare it to bouldering or sport climbing, which in comparison are so much simpler. There's a lot less going on, especially bouldering. Bouldering is the simplest because you're just focused on the pure movement and the difficulty. And then sport climbing gets a little bit more complicated because you have a rope and you have gear and you have lengths of pitches and things like that. But then, multi-pitch climbing and big wall climbing, you're just adding in extra layers. And so the more layers of things and complications you add on top of the actual climbing, the more important big wall tactics are going to be. And I think that's what deters a lot of people at first, is that, they're lacking the skills to multi-pitch or big wall climb efficiently and effectively. They're not able to have as much fun with the climbing because they're having to think and deal with all of these other things that they're maybe not used to at the sport crag or at the gym or bouldering. But personally, that's why I like it. I love the added challenge of managing all of these other systems and things and conditions and partners and all this stuff that you have to that makes the climbing harder. But when you're able to also climb hard and deal with all those things, especially 6 days into a big wall and keep sending, and you're just dialed and you're just doing it right, that is the coolest thing to me.
It sounds simultaneously super cool and rewarding, and also pretty grueling. It's like one of those things where you look at the photo of you on the side of, El Cap going up Golden Gate or Free Rider or something like that. And the photos are stunning, and it's just oh God, they're having coffee in the portaledge, the coolest Airbnb in the world. And then, you see, not as often, but you've been good, day 7 at the top, and you've somehow impossibly got 400 pounds of gear, precariously balanced on your back. You look like a pack mule, and it's so many ropes and haul bags and poop bags and it's so much. And I don't know, there's a little bit of dissonance, I think, when you were first getting into it, did it surprise you, going from kind of like the dream being like, I want to climb El Cap, it looks so cool and romantic, to like the reality where it's just like spending hour after hour trying to get a haul bag unstuck from the lip of a thing, like
No, that's a great point to bring up, is because it is so much, so much more work and so much more difficult than a photo gives it credit for. And I climbed a route on Middle Cathedral over 5 days just a few days ago. And you mentioned my story for El Corazon recently, and I did get a lot of positive feedback on that story, where when I originally started posting it, I was like, man, nobody's going to care about all of this like big wall details and stuff. I like sharing multi-pitch climbing stuff because a lot of people just don't do that. And that was kind of my first time sharing like the ins and outs of a multi-day big wall free ascent, particularly. And so, going up on this next wall a few weeks afterwards, I was like, okay, I'm going to really try and like, take more photos and videos, and based on things that I know that people are interested in now, relative to the questions they asked me, and after El Corazon and things. But then there's a thing that happens that I noticed afterwards is, like, we kind of epicked on day one. We didn't start early enough. We got caught in the sun. It ended up kind of being like a grueling day getting to camp and getting set up. And generally when things start going poorly on a big wall, you stop filming, you stop taking photos, because you're just like, that's the last thing on your mind. You're just like focused on dealing. Right. And so afterwards I was trying to I was like, man, I want to do a better job of showing the ways in which that big wall climbing is a lot of work, and it does suck sometimes. And when you plan perfectly, like, things just don't always play out the way that you think they're going to. And, I was kind of paralleling it to the van life, like glamour shots you see on Instagram that get so popularized. It just makes it look like everybody's just like waking up with an amazing view, and their like beautiful girlfriend is like making them coffee while they're hanging out in bed, like looking at the stars or whatever. And you're just like, that just never happened.
No,
that just never happened.
Don't burst this bubble for me, Jordan. This is my bubble. I need this bubble. Oh, I'm so upset.
I was like in the portal. You see like glamour portaledge shots, especially like Tommy Caldwell and Kevin on the Dawn Wall, where they each had like their own portaledge, and you see them just like hanging out in there and just like stretching and like enjoying the view. And, I was in this like cramped portaledge with my partner, just like trying to put my like shirt on, and there's all these straps like hanging in my face, and I'm like so cramped, and I'm like, this is not the glamorous like big wall portaledge life that people think exists. So,
but from that, I'm sure.
So yeah, to the point, I think it's, even if going into it, that multi-pitch climbing and big wall climbing is going to be a lot more work than any other kinds of climbing, I guess, like short of, mountaineering or like expeditions. It still comes as a bit of a shock when you actually do it, and you're like, oh man, this is like a lot more than I expected, even still. Yeah, but it's not for the faint. It's not for the faint of heart. It's certainly like blue collar climbing. But I love combining the blue collar aspects of multi-pitch and big wall climbing with like also hard performance free climbing, because that's when like you really have to do things well.
I really dig it too, personally. I appreciate you sharing that perspective. And of course, I haven't experienced it like you have. I've never, spent a night on a wall, but when I learned climbing, it was out in like Talkeets and the Needles and Joshua Tree. And so there's 4 or 5 pitches, 7, 10 pitches, kind of in that world. And of course, we're mostly talking about trad climbing here. And that already brings its own level of problem solving, building out the rack and placing gear and making sure that you're working efficiently and all the things that, that we'll probably dive into here in just a minute. But then you also have the other elements of it, like you're talking about, where it's hauling or setting up camp or planning your day properly to avoid the sun. And so, yeah, I dig that. Maybe it's because I'm not a super hard climber, and so I kind of like the chess game added in, because so it's not just like my fingers versus the rock, but it's also my brain versus the rock, which like I feel like can give me a little bit more excitement that doesn't require just like genetic ability. And so I'm drawn to it for that regard. And like, epinephrine's the hardest thing I've done. And I think that goes 5.9 or something. It's not like I'm climbing super hard stuff, but it's all relative. And so, yeah, that head game I think is or the mental aspect of it is really interesting. And is that is that what has drawn you most to it?
Yeah, I mean, man, there's so many things that appeal or draw me to big wall climbing and multi-pitch climbing. I mean, the main thing is just the volume. I like having big days. I like waking up early, climbing all day, on some epic formation with amazing views, and then having, big descent and just coming down like totally crushed and, just chowing down some food and going to bed. And that's just a multi-pitch day. When you do that 6 days in a row on El Capitan, waking up on the wall, I mean, it's just so much more rewarding, I think. And there's so many other things that you have to master to do it well. You can't just be a good rock climber and you can't just be a good big wall climber. You have to be a combination of the two. And in regards to like multi-day big wall climbing, I love the simplicity of it. When you wake up on your portaledge on day 2, there's no question about like what you're doing that day. You're like, we're climbing. Like the rope is right in front of us. The pitch is right here. You don't have to worry about an approach or descent. You have all the food and water that you need. You don't have to worry about going to the grocery store or getting gas or dealing with parking. It's just like, nope, we're just waking up. We're going rock climbing. When we're done rock climbing, we're going to go to bed and we're going to wake up and go rock climbing again tomorrow. It's just like, it's pretty simple,
I love it. It's so exciting. It's just the most romantic kind of purest form in my mind. And I know for other people, that's other things. It could be free soloing or it could be bouldering or whatever, because like you just don't have anything on. But like just something about essentially like taking up residence on the side of a vertical piece of rock is just so rad. So yeah, let's dive in, man. Let's talk. I think we can kind of break this into beginner, intermediate, and advanced with regard to multi-pitch and big wall tactics and systems. Is there kind of in general something that you see that most people struggle with or it's a challenge as they're just thematically for big wall tactics, or is it pretty focused on like ability or size of project?
I think like in the big wall multi-pitch world, a beginner could like best be defined by somebody who has trad climbed before, single pitch, but maybe is, on their first to 10th, multi-pitch route or something.
Okay.
I think that's what I would categorize as a beginner. And the thing that I see by those groups of by those climbers, which also relates to beginner boulderers or sport climbers, whatever, is just bringing too much stuff. When you're the beginner in any discipline in climbing, I think, you are fascinated by all this new gear and you like don't really know how it works yet or when you're going to use it, but you think you're supposed to have it. And so you're just going to bring it all, and that generally isn't as big of a deal when you're at the boulders or at the sport crag, because you're on the ground and you can always go back to your car or whatever. But when you're on a multi-pitch route and especially a big wall, the more stuff you bring, the more stuff you have to deal with, the more weight you have to carry. It all adds up. And so bringing too much stuff can create a big pitfall for a lot of beginner multi-pitch climbers.
Yeah, that's interesting. And first of all, that kind of makes sense where you're like, I just want to have everything because I want to feel like I'm safe. But it's to your point, it's kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy where now it's like that stuff is dragging you down or making it harder to climb. Is there something that you see common? Is it like too much protection? Like are they just like weighed down by like all sorts of cams that they don't need? Or is it a toaster oven? Like what are they bringing up these climbs that they don't need?
I don't want to be the one to say, pick out a climber and be like, you don't need all this stuff, because everybody has their own style or level of comfort in which they want to climb. So
sure.
Oftentimes I think backpacks are unnecessary. So you see a lot of beginner climbers climbing with backpacks. And if you look at, most of the advanced climbers, a lot of them aren't climbing with backpacks. And there's a time and a place for both, I think, that we can talk about. But yeah, people bringing a lot of gear, but like protection isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like you want to have enough protection, but there is a point where, I've seen people going up on a multi-pitch route that like doesn't have a crack on it bigger than a number 1, and they have like a double or triple rack up to like number 6, and you physically can't place all that big of gear, so that just comes down to like poor interpretation of like the guidebook or the suggested rack for the route that they're trying. But then, just like tons of lockers, tons of cordelette and slings, and huge like bulky water bottles, like that kind of stuff. It all adds up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then what would be your tip on that for beginners to try to right size their gear for a climb? You mentioned like in the guidebook, it's gonna suggest a rack. So essentially paying attention to that. I guess, what else? How does one hone in on kind of the proper level?
Yeah, I guess this is kind of applicable to beginner, intermediate, and advanced climbers. This is something I do with myself all the time, because you never arrive at like the place of like the perfect amount of gear that to bring every time you go rock climbing. You do your best based on the route you're climbing and the weather and the plans, how long you plan on being out and all these things. But, I guess the first thing I tell to beginner climbers is to, make a note of the things that they brought and pay attention to what they use throughout the day, and then reflect back on like, oh, we brought all these extra lockers, but we didn't end up using any of them. Or, we brought just, reflecting back on what they used and what they didn't use, and then question whether or not they need it the next time, and that can kind of help slim down, because if you're not really thinking about it, you can end up just bringing way more than you actually need. You don't question whether or not it was actually like worth bringing,
By the way, I love that for life. Like that's just like a good life lesson. Honestly, like every time my family takes a vacation, we got 2 kids, as you know, and every time we take a vacation, it's like we pack all the everything. I mean, it's like 7 bathing suits, and we're going to a place where there isn't a pool. And so, we get back after a vacation, and I am kind of like that type A, like a little OCD guy, and I'll pull out the list and I'll be like, didn't use this, didn't use this, didn't use this. And, maybe we can save $50 on Spirit Airlines next time because we don't need that extra suitcase. So multiplying that to the point where like you literally are having to haul this stuff up a wall, I can see how important that would be. And so in that sense, you're saying it comes with experience, right?
I play that game to the extreme because I'm trying to push it a little bit more sometimes. And there's a big difference between when I'm trying to like push it on a fast and light ascent of like, El Cap in a day versus like climbing a casual multi-pitch with my friend, where it maybe doesn't necessarily matter as much. But there have been times where I've like gone way light and, chosen not to bring certain things because I was like, oh, I didn't use that last time, like not going to need it. But then, you get yourself in a situation where you're like, oh, now it's dark and I'm cold and I don't have enough food and water and this sucks,
Right.
So yeah, that's what I mean. It's not like you never like fully have it figured out. You're gonna still make mistakes and then, learn from that experience, be like, okay, next time I'm definitely bringing another headlamp or something like that,
Right. Yeah, that's great, man. I love that reflective planning aspect of it. So anything else with beginners, any other kind of common pitfalls or challenges that you see beginners experience when they're getting into those bigger climbs?
Yeah, I guess generally speaking, just not having a very specific plan that they've maybe thought out or communicated with their partner. And that's generally just because there's so many other things going on that I think it's just, a lot for a beginner climber to like think about. But, having a plan with your partner before going into a multi-pitch route, like, okay, who's going to lead what pitches? who's carrying what gear, how are we going to communicate at the end of each pitch? How are we going to transition at the blaze for each pitch? What are we going to do when we get to the top? Are we going to rappel or are we going to hike down? And if
And that wraps up your free preview of this pro clinic with Jordan Cannon. There's another 33 minutes of expert tips and tricks for intermediate and advanced big wall and multi-pitch climbing, y'all. And then Jordan brings it all the way back around with some really fantastic beta that applies to all levels, including the number one tip that he feels is make or break when it comes to longer climbs. And I'm not talking about pooping on the wall here, but we do talk about that. So, hey, that's another reason to subscribe and listen to this full episode. Y'all, I'm really sorry to cut it off here like I did. You probably think that I'm a huge jerk, but this is one of the ways that I cover my expenses for doing this podcast, most of which is content that I offer up free to the community. So I hope you can understand and appreciate that. If you want to join and get full access to this show and all of the other patron and subscriber content I put out, you can cancel anytime, no worries. So if you would like to go to climb school with the likes of Jordan, Jonathan Segrist, Favia Dubik, Drew Mack, Ravioli Biceps, and so many more, pop on over to patreon.com/The Struggle Climbing Show, or if you listen in Apple, you can subscribe right there in your podcast player. Now, if you want to see some of Jordan's amazing big wall adventures, you can follow him on IG. You probably already are, at CannonJTC. And also, so cool, y'all, if you're listening to this before the end of June 2023, then you can take a big wall clinic with the man himself out in Chamonix, France. Pop by Arc'teryx Academy to learn more about that and sign up. You get to spend the night in a portaledge on the wall with Jordan. How sick is that? And if France isn't in your cards, Jordan does climb clinics really often, actually around the States and other areas, so keep track of his socials and find one that works for you. All right, that clips the anchors on this one. Thank you all so much for listening and for supporting if you can. We got more regular episodes coming your way, as well as pro clinics and other bonus content, so stay tuned. And until then, let's try hard, and remember, the struggle makes us stronger.